Our next speaker, I feel kind of silly introducing her because it's like you're sitting in somebody's house and you're introducing them to people who are walking into their own house. But nevertheless, I'll do it. I'm delighted to introduce Councilmember Mary Lehman. Mary Lehman's district includes College Park, so this is really her home. It's the northern part of College Park and the city of Laurel and Beltsville. And I can't tell you how delighted we've been with the 7 years that we've had Mary as our council member, because whenever you call her office, it's always about how do we get things done, and you tell me and I'll tell you, and let's make it happen. And I think having council members like that are rare. They shouldn't be, but they are. But I am really delighted to introduce Mary Lehman.
Thank you, Suchitra, for those kind remarks. Donna Edwards, it's great to see you. You're a tough act to follow. I do not have the years and years of experience that she does with this issue. I'm pretty new to it, but I want to begin, and I do have a script I'm going to try and follow, but I want to begin by thanking Suchitra and all of these organizations that are listed up here for putting together this event. I think it's an idea whose time has come in this county, so can we give them all a hand? Thank you. So Suchitra asked me to talk about my experience as a candidate, to share my perspective from when I ran the first time in 2010. So I do represent Council District 1. I ran for what was then an open seat. I announced in June of 2009. The party primary was in September of 2010. I had never run for office before. I was told to expect that to be competitive, I should raise between $40,000 and $60,000. So my rough goal was right in the middle, about $50,000. And so you might wonder, well, why does it cost that much to run in a district that is 1/9 of Prince George's County, roughly 95 to 100,000 people? Well, so I had a strategy, and I had, mentors that helped me. I had a strategy of, first of all, door knocking every super voter, and you might think, well, that doesn't really cost any money. Actually, it does, because you have to buy a voter list from your party. That's not free, so you have to pay several $1,000s for a voter list. I plan to do that just by handing out basic literature, introducing myself, doing about 5 to 7 targeted postcard mailings, again, to this pretty much the same universe of super voters, with some specialized mailings for women, targeted women, seniors, families, etc. And then I plan to do a few robocalls. And then I also budgeted for the obvious things like yard signs, t-shirts, and I also planned, at the very strong and I think good advice of one of my friends and mentors, Delegate Pena Melnick. She said, do not try to run a campaign out of your house. It will make your family crazy. They'll be ready to drink. Don't do that to them. And I am glad I followed her advice on that. I think I might have ended up being the only candidate in a field of 5 that did actually rent office space. And I found pretty reasonable space in an office building actually in North College Park. I only leased the space for 6 or 7 months, and it was about $1,000 or $1,100 a month. So I kind of figured up front, I had a feeling I was going to have trouble fundraising, just because the thought of asking people for money was just dreadful to me. So I cautioned my husband. I said, I'll probably end up having to make myself a loan. And, at first he was having a fit, but I said, no, it would be a loan. I'd repay it over time. And, he came to accept that. And I started out by making a small donation just to get myself started, a couple $1,000s. Later, I made another loan of about $8,000 to $10,000, and then I made a third loan of 10 for a total of 20. I did end up raising just over 40, but half of it came from my family savings. And then I also did a lot of in-kind donations. I don't even think I ever got a total handle on those, which made my sister, who was my treasurer, a little crazy. And that included everything from office supplies to computers to these miscellaneous expenses that you incur every time you turn around, like food for your campaign workers, that kind of thing. I did 3 actual fundraisers in about 15 months. I got some online donations, some by mail. Almost all of my donors were individuals, only a handful of businesses. I had, for the primary, I had no union backing or really any interest group support until I won the primary. And then I got a few small donations. My only endorsement, and I was very proud of this, but my only official endorsement was from the Sierra Club. So they made calls for me, but there was no money attached. I see Martha smiling back there. It really did mean a lot, but there was no money associated with that endorsement. Now, as far as my other opponents, I really can't speak in great detail to what their fundraising strategies were, but I want to make note of two of the four candidates in this race. So one had very deep union ties, and so his donors were mostly from labor, and that's fine. That's permissible. He ended up raising the same amount of money I did, right around $40,000, mostly from unions, including several out-of-state unions. Another candidate, a woman candidate, actually was a federal retiree, and she borrowed money from her own pension plan to run. I actually tried to reach her today to find out, were you ever able to pay all of that back, but I was not able to connect with her. So in the existing system, I think it's important to remember that candidates often form slates or tickets, and they do that for two main reasons. One is for fundraising, and then the other is kind of a combination of having the advantage of what I'll call joint branding for literature, yard signs, and other forms of advertising. And so to do that really creates a significant fundraising and public relations advantage if you can be part of a team. But I was pretty much on my own because the state representatives from my district decided they would stay out of the race because it was an open seat. Now, I told myself at the time this was a good thing because then I wouldn't be beholden to anyone. But the fact is, you do have to work harder when you're out there on your own. There's no one to kind of share the load with, and the message ends up being obviously entirely yours. So kind of as a footnote to that, imagine my surprise at being told after I won the primary on my own that I was going to have to pay several $1,000s for my name to be put on general election ballots in the 3 state districts that cover my council district. I was like, wait a minute, what? You didn't help me win the primary, but I have to, okay. But that's the system. And I didn't even have a general election opponent. I had no general election opponent, but I had to fork over money to be on these ballots. Now, I want to stop and say, well, first of all, I was lucky that I had the money. I think, well, what if I hadn't? I would have gone into more debt, obviously. But I do want to say, because my state senator is here, I think, Senator Roosevelt, there he is over there. I am not criticizing the system. It's the one we have, and we have to work within it. And unless we're independently wealthy, that is the system we have right now. So the other point Suchitra asked me to talk a little bit about is who runs now under our current system and how do they run. A lot of people that run are either they're previous office holders, so they're either incumbents for that same seat, or they've run for something else and served in the past. Or they might be aides to elected officials, which is what I had done prior to running, or they're activists with no formal political experience. I can tell you, even as a political aide of 7 years, 4 for my council predecessor, 3 for Delegate, and that's Tom Dernogo, who's here in the audience, and 3 for Delegate Pena Melnick, I had what I thought was a pretty good resume, but it didn't mean I had access to funding. And I thought then, and I've thought since then, when Suchitra first approached me about this issue, what if I had not had that money to loan myself? Not everyone can do that. And I know that the burdens and the pressures of fundraising definitely prevent otherwise strong candidates from running. And I think, and Donna, I'm sure you would agree, I'm sure that it disproportionately discourages women from running because of their financial circumstances. I personally know right now of a single woman, a single mom, who would love to run, is very well qualified, but can't afford to because of her family situation. I know there are probably many, many more like her out there. So really quickly, in the case of the expanded council that we are now looking at in next year, in 2018, because of question D, we're expanding to an 11-member council. I'm guessing that so far there are only 2 formally announced candidates. There's some speculation, or 3, I'm sorry. Jaron Levi is one of them. I see her here. There are 2 others, Mel Franklin and Calvin Hawkins. But I'm guessing that at this point there aren't more, in part at least because of the fundraising obstacle, or it's daunting, right? To run countywide in a jurisdiction with almost 1 million residents. I don't know what people's budgets are, what their goals are. I have not spoken to any candidates about that, but I'm assuming that they're probably figuring on raising a minimum. I'm thinking a minimum of $250,000, but I'm guessing it's more. So I think public financing will be especially meaningful for these at-large seats and exec candidates. But I also think public financing will expand the candidate pool for all council races, and I think that's definitely a good thing. I think anything that makes our system more sort of small d democratic is going to be a good thing. And so I'm going to wrap up with what I'm going to call insights from two people, George and Walter. And the insights from George and Walter on the Montgomery County front, you're going to hear more about the public financing system that Montgomery has adopted and that I think 3/4 of the 2018 candidates I hear are now tapping into. I had the opportunity, so the insight from George is the conversation I had about a week ago with George Leventhal about his county exec campaign. He told me that he knew from the outset that he was going to work to leverage public funding, and he said that relative to the at-large council races he's run, he finds himself this time around talking much more about the issues. He says he's doing a lot of house parties. He's meeting all kinds of new people. And he said, I'm just spending more time engaging people. I'm not spending time holding fundraisers, and I'm not burning up phone lines. That was the phrase he used. I'm not burning up phone lines looking for those larger donors. Now, George has, when we talked a week ago, he had reached the threshold of the 500 donors. I think $150 is the cap. And that has allowed him so far at this point to leverage $210,000 in public funds from Montgomery County for his exec race. And then I want to wrap up with an insight from Walter Maloney. Councilman Maloney was Mr. Dranoga's predecessor on the council, and he was a two-term council member in the 90s. Now, he said this not in the context of public financing, but I remember him saying, and I think Tom will recall this too, he would say, I would much rather get 5 $10 donations than one $50 donation any day. And why is that? Because smaller donations represent actual votes and voices. And at the end of the day, that's what you need. You need people's confidence, and you need their trust, and ultimately their vote. And so the council this county council has had one public financing briefing in the Public Safety and Fiscal Management Committee. I thought it was well received, and I think it was very informative. My goal is to have a full council briefing before the end of this year, or very early in 2018. And then my number one legislative priority, I want to make this commitment now publicly to all of you and to all county residents, is to pass a public financing bill in 2018 before I am term limited and leave the council. And thank you. I think, so just to wrap up, I know that it will encourage more grassroots campaigns, and I think people of more modest means will be encouraged to run, and ultimately that means that you'll have candidates who don't really owe anything specific to anyone. And so just so people have realistic expectations, I'm going to say when the bill passes, it would be another 4 years before it could take effect. So it wouldn't affect council races or a county exec race until 2022, till we could build up that public fund to provide the match. Thank you again for having me.